¿Qué tal, queridos amigos? ¿Cómo están? Soy Miklos Lukacs y es un placer estar nuevamente con ustedes. En esta ocasión me acompaña Attila Demkó. La entrevista va a ser realizada en inglés por razones obvias, pero este domingo voy a estar, a más tardar este domingo, voy a estar llevando la... a ver. Attila, can you listen to me?
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry. Again, this is always a problem. Siempre problemas técnicos. La gente sabe que nunca, nunca en mi StreamYard siempre tengo una presentación limpia hasta ahora. Pero bueno, quiero entonces decirles que este domingo empezamos con la entrevista, ¿no?, subtitulada al español. Y bueno, quisiera presentarles a Attila Demkó. El doctor Attila Demkó es húngaro, es experto en seguridad internacional. Su carrera es bastante extensa. Empezó en septiembre del año 99, fue asesor del primer ministro, en la oficina del primer ministro en tema de defensa y políticas de seguridad. Trabajó también aproximadamente 10 años en el Ministerio de Defensa del gobierno húngaro. Ha sido consejero de la OTAN, ¿no?, desde la parte del ministro de Defensa de Hungría en Bruselas, en Bélgica. Jefe del departamento, del departamento de policía, de la defensa de la policía de Hungría también, columnista para grandes publicaciones húngaras como Mandiner, muy, muy importantes. Ha sido también autor de un libro. Quiero compartir brevemente con ustedes este libro. Él escribió este libro recientemente. Es un libro que se llama La furia del zar, The Fury of the Tsar. Quiero compartir con ustedes rápidamente la pantalla para que lo vean. Este es este libro de aquí, para que ustedes lo puedan ver, ¿no? Y ahí tienen, bueno, este es un libro que se ha publicado recientemente, la segunda parte viene pronto y sinceramente pienso que es la mejor fuente escrita hasta ahora en todos los idiomas de lo que vendría a ser la personalidad de Putin, la visión de Putin con respecto a Rusia, el rol de Rusia en el mundo, qué es lo que pasa con Ucrania, que siempre ha sido una relación tensa, como lo vamos a ver hoy, y cuál es su perspectiva de la guerra, ¿no? Es un libro muy, muy actual y muy pronto también sale la segunda parte. Y finalmente, para cerrar, Attila es también director actualmente del Centro de Geopolítica del Colegio Matías Corvino en Budapest, en Hungría. Así que esa es la presentación de Attila Demkó. Ahora, lamentablemente, para los que no sepan inglés, van a tener que esperar hasta el domingo. Aquellos que sepan inglés, libres de quedarse. Y muchísimas gracias por su presencia, a las 322 personas que ya nos están acompañando desde diferentes partes. So, Attila, my apologies for this presentation in Spanish for my audience. I'm very excited to have you in my YouTube channel. It's a pleasure. I also have to say that we are now colleagues because I am a visiting research fellow at the Matías Corvinus Collegium, where you are head of the Center of Geopolitics. So, very welcome, Attila. It's a pleasure to have you in my program.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So, Attila, we have seen this. Nobody was expecting actually this attack. You know, the news was at least from mainstream media. We thought that nothing was going to happen. Perhaps intelligence sources were saying different things. But before we go further into the details of this conflict, could you give us a historical background? How does Ukraine come from? A little bit about the Soviet Union, the genesis of Ukraine, and this, because everybody would think, oh, but Ukraine was a country until when it was part of the Soviet Union. So could you please provide a brief explanation of where does Ukraine come? How does it fit with Russia in terms of history?
Actually, Russia and Ukraine are twins. They were born together. The state was called the Kievan Rus more than 1,000 years ago. And this is basically the birthplace of Russia, Ukraine, and even Belarus, these three East Slavic states. But after the Mongol invasion, after the invasion of Genghis Khan and his successors, this state was broken completely up. And this was how Moscow was born, the Principality of Moscow, which became the Russian Empire later, and also some other principalities remained on the western part, which are now today part of Ukraine, and culturally the heart of Ukraine. But that's in western Ukraine. That's not in Kiev. It's in the region called Lviv, which is an extremely beautiful city. And I would say that for a very long time, Ukraine was not on the map of Europe. If you search for a country called Ukraine, you will not find it basically until 1991, to the fall of the Soviet Union. Because before the Soviet Union, this area was either part of Poland, a bit of Ukraine was part of Hungary, Hungary proper, the Kingdom of Hungary, so my country. Other part of Ukraine was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but the Austrian part of the empire, not the Hungarian part of the empire. Other parts were parts of Romania. Other parts were parts of the Russian Empire. So actually, this is a country coming together from several bits and pieces in the 20th century. So what you see on the map today as Ukraine actually was finished with the transfer of Crimea in 1955 from Russia. And that was the start of the war in 2014, the capture of Crimea by Russia. You have to understand that Ukraine was a bit like Lego. You put it together by the pieces. And it happened during the Soviet Union. So when you watch Vladimir Putin's speech about that Ukraine was created by the Soviet Union and by the communists, there is a bit of truth in it, that in today's form, Ukraine is the product of the 20th century, and it's the product of communist Soviet Union. But what happened to the Soviet Union? You know, it was a communist state. It wasn't working very well, especially in the economic sphere. It was very strong militarily, but economically it was very weak. And the fall of the Soviet Union actually started partly in Afghanistan, partly in Ukraine, because of the explosion of the Chernobyl power plant. It was a huge nuclear disaster in 1986. That created a lack of faith in the Soviet Union. That created also a big economic crisis. So in a way, Ukraine was one of the reasons that this accident in Ukraine, one of the reasons why the Soviet Union finally came apart. And Ukraine became that there are 15 countries were born in the place of the Soviet Union. Like when the Spanish Empire fell apart, a lot of Latin American countries were created. And from these 15 countries, Ukraine was the second biggest. The second biggest and the second most important, with at the time with more than 53 million people. Now Ukraine, with the Russian invasion of 2014, has about 37 to 40 million people. We don't know exactly. So this is the start of, actually there were some short periods where Ukraine was independent before. Before the Soviet Union, for a while, Ukraine existed as let's say, the ally of Austria-Hungary and Germany during the last days of the First World War. And before that, there was the Cossack Hetmanate. It was a country of warriors on the middle of what is today Ukraine, under Bogdan Khmelnytsky and his successors, but that was hundreds of years ago. What you can consider as Ukraine today. It's a very, very young country. It's a 30-year-old country surrounded by 1,000-year-old countries. Or Russia is actually not 1,000-year-old, but like 800 years old. But let's say Hungary is more than 1,000-year-old. Poland is also 1,000-year-old country. So it's a pretty new country on the map of Europe, but with great heritage, with great culture, with some really fantastic cities. As I said, Lviv is really a beautiful city. So it's an interesting country, but it's a country at war today, and this war is rooted in history. So actually, and you know, usually the worst wars, the most cruel wars are which are connected to history, because history is passion, and in this war there is passion.
Excellent. Well, so from this introduction, what I can take with this, you know, very wide framework that you have provided us, that you can trace the origins of Russia and Ukraine, these twins that you say, you know, from the Kievan Rus, you know, we would say about what, 13th century or 12th century?
No. It's like the 9th century, mostly 8th, 9th, 10th century. Depends.
So it's very, very, very ancient, actually.
Yeah,
And
it's more than 1,000 years. Kiev and Rus was born.
so
Actually,
Kiev,
it was created by the Vikings. So it
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
created by the Slavs. It was created by a Viking chieftain.
yeah. Vikings that went to the Kiev and Rus, as you said, these Vikings that went to what is called now Kiev. Then I think they also were established in Novgorod at some point, and then in
Yes,
Moscow.
yes, sure.
Yes,
It was a trade route. It was a trade route to the
exactly,
Black Sea and to the Byzantine Empire. And the Vikings were, of course, interested in trade too, not only
exactly.
looting. And they were
Uh-huh.
very good organizers.
Well, then another tribes of the Vikings went to north of France, the Normans, the northern
Yeah,
one. So
yeah,
it's a Viking origin, and then you would say that Ukraine is a creation of the Soviet Union. So after the Soviet Union comes Ukraine as a country.
Yes, as I said, there were some there was a short-lived Ukrainian independence after during the last year of the First World War, and after that a bit. But that was supported by Austria-Hungary, so my country and Germany. But when Germany and Austria-Hungary was defeated, and the Communist Soviet Union was born, the Communist Soviet Union took a large part of Ukraine, and the other part of Ukraine became part of Poland.
Well, so this is very interesting. Now we said some context. We also said the end of what is the Cold War, with the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the Soviet Empire. This Cold War comes to an end, at least in paper. Even Fukuyama writes a book, The End of History, claiming that capitalism and liberal democracies had prevailed, and there was nothing else to discuss. And of course, there was a turmoil also because countries in the so-called Eastern European bloc, like including Hungary, Czechoslovakia by then, Poland, these small Baltic states, Lithuania, they were part of the Union also. They became free, independent. Now, after that period, Russia began a process of capitalization. It began a process of free market development. First Boris Yeltsin, I think, was the proponent of that model, very close to. I remember still the close contact he had with Bill Clinton by then, President of the United States, in the pushing of this free market situation. Of course, there was a problem because the power was captured by oligarchs in the fields of oil and gas, and Russia has always been a difficult country. Now, it was supposed that there would be no more problems with Russia. Right? The model had been defeated, the Soviet model had been defeated, but then comes NATO, and NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Could you give us if you could enrich what I have said, of course, with your expertise? Where NATO come from? What is NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? When was it founded, and why is it important in all this story?
It's a defensive alliance founded in 1949, organized basically by the United States of America and some Western countries, like at the time the British Empire, today the United Kingdom, France, and many other countries, Italy. And later, a lot of countries joined, including my country in 1999. So it was a defensive alliance through the Cold War, which defended Western Europe from the Soviet threat. So it was an extremely useful tool, because the European countries, are much smaller than the Soviet Union was, or Russia was, with smaller populations. So they pulled together their forces, their armies, and the United States helped them. So that's how the Soviets couldn't take militarily Western Europe. And of course, after 1991, when the Soviet Union fell, a lot of people believe that NATO is not going to be important, since there is no more threat from the Soviet Union. But then NATO mission started to Yugoslavia. I write quite a lot about that in my book, how it was, in a way, important for the story of Russia and the story of Ukraine, because it was for Russia and the NATO missions to the Balkans. It was a very bad thing for Russia, because their ally, Serbia, was defeated by NATO twice. So in 1995, the Bosnian Serbs were defeated by a NATO bombing campaign and the Croatian-Bosnian attack. And the Russians were very angry at NATO, but they were even more angry when Serbia was defeated in 1999 in the Kosovo War, by NATO, and then the Russians were pretty close to break relations with NATO. So that's the first big crisis of Russia against NATO, the Kosovo War. Russian troops actually captured the airport of Pristina in 1999 against the NATO troops, so it was a very tense moment, but it passed. And after that, it looked that Russia will accept that Hungary, Poland, and Czech Republic join NATO. But then NATO started to become, and it was the driver was the United States accepting more countries. So Romania joined, the Baltic state joined, and Croatia joined, Slovenia joined. So if you look at this, Slovakia joined. A huge organization was born now with 30 members. And it's on the borders of Russia, and Russia felt by the middle of the 2000s, so around 2004-5, that it's enough. NATO is enough. But and they told it. So the important moment in our story is the warning of Vladimir Putin when he told to the leaders of the Western world in 2007 in Munich. It's a speech to watch. It's on YouTube. You can watch it, where he basically said that, okay, you came to Russia's borders, but no more. So what happened? The George W. Bush didn't listen. The Americans didn't listen. And in 2008, they were pushing for accepting Ukraine to NATO. The Europeans, especially the French and the Germans, were not that happy about that. So a compromise was made that one day Ukraine can join NATO, basically a promise for the future. But for Russia, it was a real threat and a real pain because they see Ukraine as their twin. Or Vladimir Putin basically see Ukraine as part of the Russian sphere of interest and basically a part of Russian nation, which is crazy. It sounds crazy, especially being part of the Russian nation, since Ukrainians have a separate identity. But still, it's important what the Tsar of Russia believes, because basically Putin is the most powerful leader since Stalin or the Tsars of Russia. So his nickname is the Tsar. So what I would like to say with this, that we knew in 2008 that there will be trouble because Russia will not let it happen that Ukraine becomes part of NATO. This is a very big organization, but it's basically the strongest member is the United States. So they are leading this organization, and the Russians are very much wary or afraid of the United States. So first, Russia attacked Georgia, which was promised NATO membership like Ukraine, and it's very close to Russia. It's a smaller country to the south of Russia in 2008, and the Russian army defeated Georgia. And then in 2014, when Ukraine came close to have an agreement with European Union to get closer to the European Union, but also to get closer to the NATO, the Russians felt it. Then Russia took Crimea. But it's not a simple story that Russia, in 2014, it's a more gray story, because in 2014, really there were many voices in Ukraine that the Russian language is too strong in Ukraine. So we should push back Russian language, Russian culture. There was some violence against Russian people in Ukraine, ethnic Russians. I didn't say that very important thing that Ukraine has a lot of Russians or Russian speakers inside. So Ukrainian speakers live on the west, Russian speakers live on the east and the south. Most of the Russian speakers are actually ethnically Ukrainians, but they speak Russian mostly in life. And also there are ethnic Russians who believe that they are Russians, not Ukrainians by ancestry. So it's a very complicated picture. But what I want to say with that in 2014, there were really some nasty things against the Russian people. So Russia said that we will go and save the Russians of Crimea and help the separatists who were in eastern Ukraine to hold their ground against the Ukrainians. So this is how the war started. So actually what we see today is the continuation of this war. So that's the issue that really started this war. But this war is like 8 years old and extremely problematic now in Europe. It can lead to the biggest war since 1945, so since the Second World War in Europe. It's a very, very dangerous moment in European history.
So what I would get, of course, is a wonderful explanation, but so the first thing, it's not a new conflict then. We should, it's an 8-year conflict at least. If you can...
Russia captured Crimea from Ukraine with basically 0 casualties. The Ukrainian army wasn't defending itself in 2014, February and March.
Okay.
Yeah, Ukraine, as somebody is asking, Ukraine is not part of NATO, but it wanted to be part of NATO, and Russia attacked Ukraine before it became part of NATO. Why? Because if Ukraine becomes part of NATO, then United States must defend it, and all the other members of NATO must go and defend it. And Russia cannot fight against the United States. Russia is much weaker than the United States, so they attacked Ukraine before they could join NATO. That's the reason of the war.
Okay, so this is very telling then. So it has been a preemptive strike to avoid pulling all the North Atlantic Treaty Organization members, particularly the United States, into what Russia would assume Ukraine as a backyard, as a very invasive outpost of targeting its sovereignty. So in that sense, Attila, could we say that the measure that Putin has taken is understandable, in the sense that, for example, that it would be a real threat, considering the aggression, the animosity between the West, or at least NATO countries and Russia? Would it be considered a real threat to Russian sovereignty and integrity, this Ukrainian threat joining the OTAN, the NATO, sorry?
So if we go back to 2014, at least there is some explanation. As I said, there were some attacks on Russians. In Odessa, 42 Russians were killed by Ukrainian nationalists. So that war had more explanation than today's war. What started today? Actually, it's the continuation of the war, but in a more open and brutal way. So what I would say that, yes, Russia had some security concerns, which are understandable. Yes, Russia had some concerns about the Russian speakers and Russian culture in Ukraine, which is understandable. And some things they have done in 2014, at least some people understand it. I think to capture Crimea and to annex it to Russia, that's too much. But to support, for a country to support its ethnic kin when it's in trouble, some say it's acceptable. But what is happening today is not that. Because today we see an unprovoked aggression. Okay. In 2014, you could say that there were some things which are provocative. For example, many Ukrainian nationalists didn't want Russia. Russia had a base in Sevastopol, which is in Crimea. Didn't want Russia to have this base in Crimea. That's Crimea, yes, in the south. That's a big peninsula in the Black Sea, on the Black Sea. So that was also something in 2014. If you want to explain why Russia moved, yes, they were afraid of Sevastopol to become a base for America. So that's the issue, that in 2014 you had explanations. And actually America was very dismissive of Russian interests before, very dismissive of Russian concerns over the Iraq war, which was a totally unjust war. And caused a lot of harm to Russia, because Russia had good business relations with Iraq. So the Libyan war, Russia had good business relations with Libya. Russia lost billions and billions of dollars on these wars. So they were very angry. They were furious. They were really furious because of Iraq, because of Libya. Vladimir Putin, the Tsar, was really furious because of the events on Syria. Because of America, America was dismissing Russia, humiliating Russia. That's how they saw it. For example, John McCain, who was a very influential senator in the United States, he said that Russia is no more than a big oil station, a tank station, fuel station. And Russians were hurt. Or President Obama said that Russia is only a regional power. And, Russia was a big power, a great power in its history, most of the time for hundreds of years. So when they heard that America treats them treats them second class, like if you are a regional power. They were very angry. So in 2014, you can find explanation. But what is happening today, it's an all-out war against Ukraine. In 2014, they didn't attack Kiev. They didn't attack Odessa. They didn't attack Kharkiv. They didn't attack many towns. They attacked Crimea. And Crimea, I forgot to say, has Russian majority. So the people of Crimea, 2/3 are Russian. So actually, they were very happy to see the Russians.
So Attila, just briefly, I am pointing in the map. So this area, so Luhansk and Donetsk have been the areas taken, yes, where Russia has recognized the independence.
These are the separatist republics, yes.
Yes, this part where I'm pointing the little hand here, where I'm circling, that's mostly Russian-speaking ethnic Russians in that area?
There are many ethnic Russians, and most of the people, not all of them, are speaking Russian as the mother tongue or the most important language, but they are Ukrainians, ethnic Ukrainians.
And can I say also that here in the southern part...
Odessa too. Odessa too has a lot of ethnic Russians and Russian speakers, a lot. Yes.
So the more Ukrainian side would be more like Ukrainian would be where I'm circling.
Actually, the two cities, Lviv and Ivano-Frankivsk, these are the heartland of the Ukrainians, these two cities. So you were right to point out these two cities.
And Kiev, which is here it's Kiev, but
Kiev is the capital. But Kiev has a lot of people whose mother tongue is Russian and a lot of people whose mother tongue is Ukrainian. So it's a mixed city. If you walk on the streets, and I've been to Kiev like a dozen times, at the time I heard more Russian than Ukrainian, but it's the most of the people are ethnic Ukrainians in Kiev.
Perfect. Now, if you allow me, it's actually a map that you recommended me to put, so we can describe a little bit more the conflict of the details of the conflict. Let me share this map. How have these events been unfolding in the during the past 24 hours? Let me show briefly. It's Chrome tab. So here it is. Share.
So Russia launched an attack, as you can see on the map, from the south, from Crimea, which Russia took in 2014.
Yeah.
It's very important that the Ukrainians switched off the water from that big river. You can see the blue of the lake and the river. So there is a channel to Crimea from that river called the Dnieper to Crimea, and the Russians were angry that there is no water in Crimea. That's one thing. The other thing is from the north, you can see Chernobyl on the north, where the atomic power plant blew up in 1986. If we go north of Kiev, that's yes, there. So they are attacking there. They are 100 kilometers now from Kiev with that attack. So that's the closest point to Kiev. And they took an airport in Kiev. I don't know if they still have it, but it's a big fighting around the airport of one of the airports, a smaller airport of Kiev, not the two main airports. They are also attacking from the separatist area, which is on the east. So it's three main attacks, but they may have smaller attacks at other places in Ukraine. So it's a very big operation. You cannot compare it to what happened in 2014. Visibly, they want to take all of, or at least half of Ukraine, the Russian-speaking half of Ukraine, with this very big operation. So this is a major war in Europe with possibly extreme consequences on on South America too, because it can lead to a world crisis, and it can lead to a world economic crisis. And the poorer or the more, let's say, for America, it's easy to survive a world crisis. For South America or Europe, it's not that easy. And somebody writes that yes, the West was bullying Russia for a very long time, but I said that John McCain called it the big fuel station. You don't do this to a country with the biggest or the second biggest nuclear force, atomic power force in the world. So I think America made a big mistake with how they treated Russia, but also it's a Russian aggression. So we have to be very balanced. We have to see that Americans, the Americans were like this, that we are Americans, we can do everything. We can take Ukraine to NATO. And of course, the Russians said, Yet, no. So the Ukraine in many ways is the victim of American hubris that we can do this. Of course, America couldn't save Iraq. They just attacked Iraq without any reason, and they left. Iraq is now a disaster. They were in 20 years for Afghanistan. They left Afghanistan in a disaster. Americans are usually very, very self-confident. And I was working with Americans. I really love the American officers. They are very professional. But when you told them that, I told them again and again that you cannot do this, and they were so self-confident that they can do this. And now you can pay the price in Peru, in Argentina, because the inflation will go up, the fuel price will go up because of this war, the gas prices will go up, fertilizing prices will go up.
If you allow me, Attila, I was talking today. I called today my mom from Peru, and she said that fuel jumped from 13 something soles to 20 soles.
Ukraine can make a new world crisis, not even if it's not a world war. I don't think there will be a world war, but it can be a world crisis because of the economy. Because Russia is one of the biggest. Russia is the second biggest oil producer country, and Russia is one of the biggest natural gas producer country. So if Russia is switched off from the world market, what will happen to fuel prices? Now it's $100 per barrel. It can be 200. And America can still pay for it, but can Peru pay for it, or Argentina pay for it, or Hungary pay for it? So it's a very dangerous situation for all of us. So it's not something, you are in beautiful South America on a beach somewhere, maybe enjoying the sun, and we are in a cold and dark Europe. No, it will affect you. This is a very big war, and this war will, you feel it tomorrow. This war on the price you pay.
As I said, gas in Peru has jumped from 13 to 20.
Yes, absolutely. So
this is gold trade today. Gold has just spiked like this. The stock markets have just plunged. I know this because I have done some investments, so I can see that things have been affected. And it has been dramatic. The global stock markets have just gone down, and gold has, and Bitcoin again. This is another, not to get it deeper into this, but everybody was thinking that Bitcoin was going to be the safe haven. Gold proved again that it is the safest haven so far on Earth. And Bitcoin,
what Russia has? A lot of gold.
Now,
a lot of gold. They are one of the biggest gold producers.
Now, what is going to happen? You were talking about the consequences. So, just short answers and so we can go further into other topics. So, short answers. What is your forecast? How long do you think this conflict will last?
Well, it's very hard to tell.
I know, but
the major military operations can last for weeks. But this war will not stop with if the Russians take Kiev, or if the Russians take the Donbass and the Crimean outer part of Crimea, Odessa. It's very hard to take all of Ukraine. So if they don't take all of Ukraine and they don't destroy all of the Ukrainian army, then this war will continue. So it's a very big unknown, and I cannot say of how long it can be. It's already 8 years old. So so I don't think it's going to be 8 more years. But if Russia defeats Ukraine completely, then Ukraine will surrender, and there will be some kind of new territorial arrangement for Ukraine. It's going to be a big shock, because countries will see that force can take away parts of other countries. And of course it happens. So what happened to Argentina with the United Kingdom? That the United Kingdom was stronger than Argentina in the big war in the 80s. So what I'm telling you that this is for many people a moment to be afraid, because many countries can say after Russia that yes, it was my part of my country, so I take it. So it's a long-term issue for world security and world economy too.
So what you are certain about is that there will a big financial economic global crisis will follow. That you are
It's
certain
possible.
about.
Well, there are very few things that are certain, but it's very likely.
It's highly likely. Okay.
It's highly likely. I don't know when it will start. I don't know if how much it will affect South America, but in Europe we already feel the problems.
That's
And
what
Europe is still very important. If Europe is sick, then the world will be sick.
Exactly. That was something I wanted to pose as we were talking about the crash in the stock markets, gold going up, gas going up, like fuel. But gas also. Gas is also a crucial geopolitical commodity in the region, because Russia provides gas to Europe. And the Germans have just stole a large gas supply from Russia because of this conflict. But at the end, it seems that the German population will be the most affected by these economic sanctions that are aimed at Russia. But at the end, they end hurting their local populations. What do you think? What role does gas play in this area? What alternatives would Europe have, Western Europe in particular, to gas supplies if Russia does not provide them because of these sanctions?
So, about 40% of the EU's gas is coming from Russia. And there can be some replacement through the LNG, liquefied natural gas ports Europe has. But they cannot replace all of the Russian gas. So we are at the end of the winter. It was a very mild winter for Europe. So we can survive this winter. But if Russia doesn't give gas for the next winter for Europe, then Germany can freeze. Western European countries can freeze. It can be a problem even for Hungary. We have more gas than Germany. We have a huge reserve under the country. It can be enough for months during the winter if we can fill it up fully. And we have more than Germany and others. But it can be a problem for my country because most people use gas for heating. But for Germans, they use it also for electricity. And the Germans were like shooting themselves in the feet with closing their perfectly working nuclear power plants after the accident in Fukushima. Germany is not a country like Chile or Peru with earthquakes. There are no big earthquakes or Japan. There are no big earthquakes in Germany. They still said, "Oh, we are so afraid because of Fukushima." That was very silly, and actually it made Germany more dependent on Russia. And because Germany is the strongest country in the European Union, it's still a world-class economic power. Militarily, Germany is nothing like Germany used to be, but economically very important. So what happens to Europe if there is a crisis or energy crisis in Germany? I don't want to see that.
Okay. Now, in terms of the immediate impact of war, I have heard the position of Hungary. Hungary also has a play here, because I would say that based on what I have read, and my knowledge is very limited on this, that's why I called you. But there's a Hungarian population in the border with Ukraine, a significant Hungarian population, ethnic Hungarians, Hungarian-speaking Hungarians. And
actually, they are Hungarians like me. So
Hungarians. Okay.
So we lost this territory in the First World War. Sorry.
That's the Trianon, yes? 2/3 of your country.
Yeah, 2/3 of our country, and this part of the country was also lost, with much more Hungarians than today. Yeah. But many of them left. Some of them were killed after the Second World War. So it's a tragic story, and it's a very poor province now. Hungary is like 4 times richer per capita than this part of Ukraine. So it's a tragic story. There is a beautiful province with amazing Hungarian history inside, and it was a conflict because the Hungarian language was attacked like the Russian language after 2014. We had a conflict with Ukraine because they started to modify the school system, how you use your language. So actually, the Ukrainian-Russian conflict is a very nationalist conflict, but not only the Russians are nationalists, but the Ukrainians too. So that's what I said, that in 2014, there were some explanations for what Russia did, because there were very big attacks on the language, Russian language, and Russian people. There was fighting between Ukrainians and Russians. So yes, this is a very, very beautiful. I hope I can show you it one day. It's an amazing place. This is for us a holy place because the Hungarian tribes or the Hungarian people entered today's homeland, what is Hungary today, more than 1,000 years ago there. So these mountains are the holy mountains for Hungary. Now it's in Ukraine because we lost it in the First World War, but it's an emotional, sacred place for us.
Well, in that sense, of course, I'll be going back to Hungary on Sunday, and I am going to take your word, of course.
After the war is over, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully, of course. And well, the thing is that what I was trying to ask is that there might be, well, we always have to be open to all the possibilities, but there might be a humanitarian crisis. If we hope that doesn't happen. But Hungary has said that it won't provide military support, but it will open borders for Ukrainian, humanitarian Ukrainian refugees. Yeah. What is? How does this come up with, for example, the extreme tension that Hungary has maintained with the European Union in terms of immigration? Everybody's thinking, oh, Hungarians just don't want borders open for no one. They are, pretty much they have been pictured as Nazis because that's the narrative.
Yeah, I know the international media, how we were painted, but it's not true. We accepted refugees when the Yugoslav wars happened. We accepted refugees from Croatia, and not only Hungarians. There are Hungarians in Croatia and Serbia too, because we lost territories to these countries too in the First World War, and in the second too. So anyway, we accepted everybody: Serbs, Croats, Bosnians. We had a problem with the migration crisis in 2015 because people came not from the war, but came through Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, and then to our country. And we said that you are not a real refugee. You came through 3 or 4 or 5 safe countries. But in case of Ukraine, we are the first safe country, or Poland or Romania. So the refugees will come to these countries. And of course, we will follow protocol and we will treat them very well. And let's hope that we can avoid it, because we don't want to show how good we are because of a war. Let's avoid the big wave.
Exactly.
But we will definitely treat them excellent way.
But it shows something. It destroys the media narrative. So people have to understand here that media has a bias reporting of Hungary, the Western media. It is
Hungary is one of the countries which said no to a lot of things which the international media and big corporations are pushing, or what the Americans pushing. We are not a big country. We are 10 million people, but we have the fighting spirit. So we said, no, thank you. We don't want this, or we don't want that. And of course, we are attacked and really fight for this. The biggest conflict was the migration crisis, when 500,000 people arrived to our border, and we are 10 million people. So we would have been flooded, and we said, no, they cannot enter our country. And this was a big conflict with the European Union. We are in the European Union, but we are a sovereign country, and we must decide who we want to take to our country or not.
Exactly. And I thank you for making this clarification, because people speak from ignorance, and they are deliberately misinformed by the media. So the media portrays a very distorted picture of what's going on. Hungary has a tradition of receiving people. Hungary is a friendly, open country. Hungary collaborates with allies, and Hungary has a position of, I would say, it has assumed, this is a personal opinion, it has assumed a very responsible and historically informed position with regards to the conflict.
Even with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, we will not repeat the propaganda, because there is Russian propaganda and there is Western propaganda, American propaganda. If you listen to what we say or what I say here, I can tell you the truth, that it's a conflict of two nationalism. It's not about democracy versus autocracy. It's a conflict of two nationalism. Now it's Russian nationalism which is attacking Ukrainians, because they want to see Russia to return to its old pride and old, greatness. That's what the Tsar, that's what Vladimir Putin wants. That's what I write about in my books, how he thinks. And one man can make history. Vladimir Putin is one of the people in today who makes history happen. But usually, if you read the American media, you will see a one-sided picture of him. He's not just a tyrant. He's not just somebody who steals a lot of money. Okay, there is a truth in it to be, but he's also a nationalist leader who wants to be Peter the Great, who created the Russian Empire. So he wants to be a new Peter the Great. So what I try to do usually, and what Hungary tries to do, is to say no to propaganda, no to the narratives which we are being told by CNN, by BBC, by these big news media corporations of the world. And we are hated for that. We are hated for telling, well, I don't know if I know the truth, because it's a very hard thing to know everything. But at least I know that what I'm telling is what is in my heart, and not dictated by somebody. And most Western observers, or most countries in NATO and EU, even if they know the truth, they don't dare to say, and we dare to say it.
Exactly. Now, one last question. People are confused. Of course, Hungary has achieved certain, certain profile in Latin America, particularly for the conservative stance of Prime Minister Orban, or let's put it, it's national conservatism against what he has called the illiberal, this illiberal democracy that Hungary is, an alternative model to the Sorosian model of democracy. Now, they have seen that they have defended very strongly the terms of the concept of family, the concept of marriage, the concept of education. Now you have a referendum on April 3rd where these issues are going to be discussed. So people here have witnessed a conflict between Hungary that tries to vindicate its traditions, its uniqueness, versus this globalizing force that is the European Union. Now, I translate this to the conflict. We see, for example, that with all its ills and weaknesses, nobody can deny that Putin defends his motherland. He's defending the Russian interests, the Russian territory, Russian integrity, whereas the European Union, expressed as, for example, and the United States as in NATO, they don't seem to have that particular, stance of defending something in concrete. We know that they defend a rainbow flag. We know that they defend LGBT rights and all these, eco-feminism and all these weird ideas. But there's no stance of where we see them standing for the defense of something that is relevant or valuable for them. How do you see this? How can we explain this to people who see this as a contradiction? Why are these countries or these people that were supporting Hungary or even Putin, in their conservative stances, now criticizing Putin because of this? Could you provide an explanation?
Vladimir Putin is a patriot in his mind. So he wants to serve his country. He wants to make his country great. He wants Russia to be one of the most powerful countries in the world. And many Western leaders, they just don't believe it anymore. They believe that we should be tolerant in some ways and extremely intolerant in other ways. They are revolutionaries. They are the Che Guevaras of today in Germany or in many other countries, or in some of the Democrats in America. And they are creating a destroyed world because communism didn't work. And this, I call it the new communism, new Marxism, what's happening in Western Europe, cannot work because it goes against human instincts. Goes against the very basic part of our soul. And Vladimir Putin, I think he's a patriot in his mind. We can dispute about this war. I think he has a responsibility in this. But what I don't question, that he believes that he's doing it for Russia. He's doing it for his own people. And that's the issue in the West, which is usually not understood, that he is a patriot who believes in Russia. And you cannot buy him, you cannot force him, you cannot do anything with someone who believes in what he is doing. You understand? It's always the biggest thing in the world. And of course, the Ukrainians, they defend their country, those Ukrainians who are not pro-Russian, because there are many who are pro-Russian. And you have to understand them too. That's why I say that this conflict has two sides in Ukraine, at least two sides. But from the word, we don't understand the real thing. The real thing is passion. The real thing is nationalism. The real thing is, I want to achieve greater Russia. That's what Putin says, or capture back what was before. And of course, the Ukrainian nationalists, they want to make the Russians speak Ukrainian, the Hungarians speak Ukrainian. So the Western countries, they speak of democracy versus authoritarian Russia. No, it's about that. No, Hungary, somebody's saying that Hungary and Poland supports Russia. Poland definitely doesn't support Russia. Poland has extremely bad memories of Russia. And Hungary, we have a mixed opinion, because we understand some of the things Russia is afraid of for Russian language and culture. But we are also seeing this new Russian invasion as unexplained. So it's not black and white in Hungary, but definitely, if we want to end this war, or if we want to live in a more peaceful world, we have to understand the logic of Vladimir Putin and the Russians. If you don't understand them, and if you say that they are only evil, then we can continue these wars forever. That's the issue. That's what I was trying to work. That's why I wrote my books. That, guys, we have to understand what Putin thinks. It's important what we think about Vladimir Putin, but it's important. I think it's quite important what he thinks. And if people would, follow my advice, for example, I was in the Ministry of Defense. I was advising against inviting Ukraine to NATO, because I knew it's going to create big trouble in 2008. And I said it in 2014 that it can lead to war when it happened. I was negotiating with my minister. I was negotiating with the Ukrainian minister. And we asked him in February 2014 not to touch the language rights of Hungarians, of Russians, of Romanians. They had very good language rights before 2014. They touched it. And language in Europe, many times, maybe you don't understand because you all speak Spanish in the Spanish word, but for us, we have different languages. Language is sacred. Culture is sacred. And these Ukrainian laws touched Russian culture, Russian language, Hungarian culture, Hungarian language. And this is, goes against the beliefs of many people. There is a saying in Europe that since the Yugoslav wars, that language laws or language can lead to war if you touch the other people, language and culture, if you push it, if you disrespect it. And this is one of the big reasons of this war in Ukraine. Not only geopolitics, not money, definitely not money, because for Russia it's not something to do it for money. They are losing a lot of money on it. Putin themselves, he's losing his retirement on it. He's going to be 70. He could spend his time with his grandchildren. But he's so I'm not, of course, I'm not glorifying Vladimir Putin here, just to be very clear. Because this is a very serious thing to start such a war. But I'm saying that we have to understand his mindset.
Yes.
And what the West is saying, that you are a pariah. Country, Vladimir Putin, you are a pariah. You can do that, of course. But this is the second most powerful country in terms of nuclear weapons. The second most powerful country, even more powerful army than the Chinese army. So you cannot just dismiss Vladimir Putin, because he's the mind behind what is happening in Ukraine today. And if you understand his mind, you can counter it or you can talk to him.
Excellent. Attila, it has been a pleasure, 55 minutes, nearly 1 hour of conversation. It has been very, very enriching, eye-opening. It is a very different narrative of what we view in the media. It's a much more informed, culturally and historically sensitive approach that you have provided us. I would say people should look at sources like you. You are one of the foremost experts on international security in Hungary and in the region. And I am very, very proud to have hosted you in my humble channel. I can tell you that we have got over 400 people at some point viewing this conversation, which is amazing, particularly to an audience that is Spanish speaking, and now we're doing it in English, and we have just arranged it in the last 3 hours, literally. So thank you so much, Attila, for these wonderful insights, for this very well-informed, very culturally sensitive analysis, as I have said. And I don't know if you would like to dedicate some words to our viewers, to our friends in Latin America. It's not South America. All the Spanish-speaking worlds, I have audience. My audience is from all the Spanish-speaking world, including Spain, United States, Latinos in Canada, Argentina, Chile, even Brazil. The floor is yours to say good.
What I can tell you that I just love Spanish. It's the most fantastic language in the world. I love to hear it. Actually, my books write, one of the storylines are in Venezuela, and this is a country of tragic fate. I would like to visit all of South America because this is maybe the most beautiful part of the world. And we Europeans with our winters, we just wish to be in Peru or in Chile or in Ecuador. And one more thing I would like to say, that we should pray for the people of Ukraine. People are dying now. I pray for the Ukrainian soldiers who took me to the front lines in 2016. I pray for the Ukrainian soldiers who took me to Crimean border in 2017. This is a war. People are dying, and we should pray for them that it will be short and people, not many people will lose their life. This is a very serious situation. And thank you, Miklos, for your kindness, and thank you all the viewers for following us. Unfortunately, this is something we will all feel, this war.
Thank you, Attila. Just a closing in Spanish. Gracias a todas las personas que han estado presentes en este vivo. Espero que les haya servido. Como dije, el domingo va a estar con subtítulos en español para quienes no pudieron entender la conversación en inglés. Y los invito, como dice Attila, a que vean, consulten otras fuentes. Los medios de prensa tradicionales no están informando, son fuentes de propaganda. Se puede hacer lo mismo de los medios de prensa de los dos lados. Pero creo que esta es una opinión de un experto informada, no es un sujeto que se informó de última hora viendo articulitos y videitos en YouTube. Attila Demkó es un profesional de primer nivel y me precio de que gente de esta categoría informe a mi audiencia. Así que, Attila, once again, thank you so much. Y a todos ustedes, muchísimas gracias y hasta otra ocasión. Hasta luego.